dadgum government, you sorry so-and-sos. You got your damn hands in every pocket of my clothes. Well, you
and good morning, Muskegon. And happy Mother's Day to all the mothers out there in radio, podcast land, iHeart Radio land, and computer land. And happy Sunday to all of us sons and daughters, all those wonderful mothers. This is Ion Muskegon, and I'm Jim Riley here in Muskegon's Clear Channel Studios with my friend and engineer, that legendary Oscar Osbo. And back in the co-host captain's chair on the poop deck, we have Captain Fred Birch. Good morning, Fred and Oscar.
Good morning.
You guys are joining me in Muskegon's number one rated political talk radio show, number one in our time time slot. Thank you very much. We need a little of that lingo from the captain. You probably learned that back in the good old days. And we do want to have you on the radio. If you're interested, give us a call, 231-830-3109. Now, one thing we found out last week, actually we found out a little bit before that, when we have a guest who's calling in, and we're going to have a guest in the 9 o'clock hour phoning in, when we have a guest who is phoned in, we cannot take other phone calls. And we're going to have a guest today. So if you want to call between now and 9 or call sometime after we hang up with our guest. So just keep that in mind. And again, that's really what this show is about. We want to get you involved. And if you're not inclined to call, then we're certainly thrilled that you're going to be listening because we've got lots of things going on in Muskegon County, some good and some not so good. Lots of interesting stuff happened this past week. And I will talk a little bit about our guest, but I'm going to start off with on this day in history, and I'm going to come back to it. But on this day in history, in 1648, poor Margaret Jones of Plymouth, Massachusetts, was found guilty of witchcraft and sentenced to be hanged by the neck. And thankfully, this was before Mother's Day. But the reason I mention this is, of course, we all know that witchcraft and the witches and the hangings and all this was really the result of a mass hysteria. And in our 9 o'clock hour, we will have, I think, an interesting and very timely guest, Jim Lakely, who is the Director of Communications of the Heartland Institute, which is headquartered in Chicago. And they're a nonprofit research and education organization, and their expertise is aimed at free market solutions to the various social and economic problems that we've got, that we face every day. Certainly our leaders face every day. We face the results of those problems every day. But we will be talking about wind power in the context of what they're going to be having, which is the International Conference on Climate Change in Chicago, which will be held next week. Interestingly, the 2 days or the 3 days following the NATO summit in Chicago, and I don't know if you've been following this at all, but apparently the anarchist groups throughout the world now are rallying, going into the Chicagoland area.
Well, they can't fly. There's a no-fly zone that's going to be put over the Chicago area, so they have to walk in.
Well, they'll be able to fly in on commercial jets, at least for a certain period of time, but they won't be able to buzz the various locations. But it's a sign of the times that people who hate our capitalistic system, and that's what we are. We are a capitalistic country. That people who truly hate it, I mean, they show it by their posters and by their very actions, are allowed to get away with what they are allowed to get away with. You can imagine if it was a bunch of Baptist ministers out there breaking windows in support of, let's just say, abortion and things of that sort, they would be rounded up quite quickly, imprisoned, or certainly jailed, and sentenced to prison at some point. So we have a situation in this country not unlike what the Germans had in the 30s, where certain groups are allowed to go out and thuggishly impede progress, impede the lives of other innocent people and businesses, and other groups are not allowed to do that. So that's an unfortunate situation, but we are not hanging yet those who disagree with the global warming church. But we just found out, was it last week or perhaps a little bit before that one of the top administrators in the EPA was just sacked because he had essentially said that what we need to do when we move into areas and we're talking with businesses is to do what was it the Huns or the Turks or someone in the medieval times would go into a city and rather than say, hey, can't we all get along, they would take 10 people at at random and crucify them, and that would be a word of warning.
Romans.
It was the Romans. Okay, well, there we go. The Italians have been kind of goofy ever since then. But not the Italians here in America, folks. But they would take 10 people, they would crucify them, and then that message got around. And our EPA, the heads of these departments would like to do the same kind of thing metaphorically. And so we're going to find out how the Heartland Institute will be handling the results, the rabble, the remainders of this NATO summit also.
Well, and also, when we talk to them, we've got the big wind power situation that was announced this last week with the signing of the deal in here in Muskegon. So.
Exactly, and that's why that's one of the reasons that I asked Jim to come in, or at least to be our phone-in guest today, because our county, now at this point, we're not spending any money, and from what I've been able to discern in looking at this contract that was signed just on Thursday by our Muskegon Board of Commissioners, all they did was give the rights to GAMSA, which is the company that is developing this wind farm out, or is planning on developing this wind farm out at the county wastewater site, giving them the exclusive rights. I believe it's $50,000 a year. Will come back to the county, and so I have no problem with somebody looking at it. It's interesting, though, that another company that had partnered with GAMSA has pulled out, and our county leaders, I think intelligently, and I hope this was done in an intelligent manner, they did add to that contract an indemnification against being sued. So in other words, if something comes up. Now, the question I would have asked, and sadly none of the county commissioners did ask at that meeting, was, why are you fearful of being sued? This seems like a pretty straightforward contract. You're going to pay $50,000 for the rights to develop it on a 3-year deal. Why would you worry about getting sued? So that unfortunately wasn't a question that was brought up. But maybe
because you were in the room, maybe, or
it's hard to say. We were all in the room because I do videotape those Muskegon County Commission meetings, and we do put them up on ionmuskegon.com. And it was actually quite a dull meeting. Hey, I also
they're always tons of excitement, aren't they? Yeah, something to write home to mom about.
Tons of fun.
Yeah.
Therein lies perhaps one of the reasons that I more often than not sit alone with my camera videoing them. But as boring as they may be, the results of what they do is very exciting to your pocketbook. Right. And as we have found, anybody, especially now that we're coming into spring and looking at filling our pools and watering our yards and washing our cars outside, that the cost of the water that you pay, the water bill and the sewer bill is net as
the electric
president.
Bill. I was finding out about the electric too, how that just went up.
Well, electric is going to go up tremendously.
Well,
over the
they
next
used
few
to.
years.
My house is powered by electric completely, just because of the area I'm in, but. They used to give you some kind of a deal if you heated your house with electric. You got some kind of a deal. You don't get that anymore. You don't get anything. You get that's just it's flat.
Do you know when that happened? That's interesting because I recall that also. Yeah,
Sure, that was in the 70s and 80s, early 80s.
Okay, but it still went on to not that many years ago.
Right. Well, we had it when we first
not
moved
that many
in
years ago for us.
Yeah, there we go. There we go. Well, yes, and again, so while these meetings may be boring. And I can assure you many of them are, but it is important that we get involved, and at least, and I'm certainly glad that I attend these meetings. I know Fred has attended meetings, and many others who are going to get more politically active are attending these meetings because the ultimate results really matter to us. And a question came up. Somebody, a friend of mine and I were chatting about possibly running for public office, and we'll talk quickly, make sure we don't forget, because Tuesday is an important day to sign up if you want to run for public office. But we were talking about what we can accomplish, and are there really serious problems? And I think the biggest thing that anyone who can run for office at any level, be it the county, the city, the the township level, the library board, or what have you, is that you can see the information, and we can all be the Paul Revere of our community or of that board and get the information out to the public. I know this is something that Commissioner Alan Jagger has really made a big attempt to do, and so far has failed because he hasn't gotten any support from the board, but he has publicly stated and requested on numerous occasions of the county board that they give the commissioners more time from the information to the time of the vote.
More time, and to post it, to make it available for the public.
And to make it available, exactly, and understandable, so that not only can the commissioners understand it, but they can take that issue to the voters and find and get some feedback. And so that's one of the important things that you can do if you run for office. But there's another biggie that has come up, and I will harp on this because I think it's critically important. When you have a county that is, or a state, as we found with the 8 years under the Granholm administration, when you have a county that is well managed or poorly managed, companies will react. If you have a state that's poorly managed and has made it clear that they're not the friend of corporations, the corporations will leave. Just simply, they will either leave, or they will not expand in the county, or they will not move to it. And we've seen this California, New York, and certainly Illinois, and of course we know this well here in the state of Michigan, and in particular one of the highest unemployment regions in the whole state, which is Muskegon County.
Which goes back and forth to what we've talked about before, which is you've got counties to the south and to the east of us that have the same or perhaps fewer natural resources and natural things that are abundant than Muskegon does, and yet Muskegon lags behind those counties. It's just astonishing. What's the difference? Well, the only difference is how you govern the county.
That is a critical difference, and well stated. And one of the things that companies look at, and we had a guest here a few months ago who was talking about this. He's an executive at a company, and he was saying that when our company or when their company makes decisions, looks at, should we expand here? Should we buy this big piece of equipment or build this building and expand here? Or should we move someplace else? They look at numerous things, but one of the most important things they look at is the local municipal governance, because they're worried about if they make a commitment, a massive financial commitment, and an emotional commitment too, when you move into or move out of a community. When you make that commitment, you want to make sure that the rules aren't going to change once you've got there. And what we have here in Muskegon County has been, at least for the last 10 years, has been consistency. And the consistency has been that they're generally anti-business, and they're spending money that they don't have at the county level, to the point where 3 years ago, or 10 years ago, the underfunding of the county pension and employee health care benefits, the underfunding, by the way, should be zero. In other words, it should be fully funded. We had about $5 million worth of underfunding 9.5 years ago, when many of the current group who are here now were first elected. The most recent numbers were we have $109 million worth of underfunding for these. These are promises made to the county employees and retirees.
In a county this size, that adds up to a big chunk of change for every man, woman, and child.
Yeah,
yes, it
does.
About $4,500.
If you do, yeah, well, that's an interesting number. I hadn't heard that. $4,500 per. Holy moly! Well, that's a lot of money, folks. And I would just say that one of the important things is that that I listen to the music when it comes on, and maybe I take a break at the right occasion. So we will be back.
The Talk of Muskegon.
Well, you dadgum government, you sorry so-and-sos. You got your damn hands in every pocket of my clothes. Well, you dad.
And we are back, and I've even got my headphones on, so
Thank you.
we can do this like the professionals that we are. We were talking about the amounts that the county, and again, this is just an example. This is, again, why this show, you may be listening to us all over the country, as you can on iHeartRadio and on your computers, but the same kind of thing happens wherever you live. And if you live in California, you're seeing companies leaving and people leaving in good measure because the state and the local governments are not helpful to bring in corporations.
Just as an aside, yesterday they came out with a report that California's new deficit is $16.9 billion. That's up from $9.6 billion that was estimated in January, so it's almost doubled since January.
Holy moly.
Yeah,
and that's a deficit that by law must be made up.
Well, yeah,
and
it's there.
Let me add to that, because I saw the number and I said, boy, well, as big as it looks, it's probably way less, because these deficits, those are cash deficits. For instance, Muskegon County, and I've heard some of the Muskegon County leaders say this, I've said we're broke, and the Muskegon County leaders said, oh, we're not broke, we can pay our bills.
We still have checks.
Well, they can still pay their bills, which is true. The problem is that, yes, they can still pay the cash flow, but the reality is that they continue to borrow. And the analogy would be a family where, let's just say they're making $40,000 a year, and they're spending $40,000 a year, or they're spending that $40,000 a year, but they're additionally spending another $10,000 or $20,000 a year because they keep getting credit cards. So that even though the cash flow is such that they're able to spend $60,000 and come up with $60,000 to pay for it, the reality is that these credit cards, at some point, they're not going to be able to continue to get new credit cards, and it will all explode, just like Europe.
Well, we're a microcosm of the U.S. economy. I mean,
Exactly.
that's essentially what the nation is doing. The difference is that the county cannot issue money, and so they can't just go out and print money and decide that they're going to pay their bills with that money. And the problem is, and the real question always becomes, there's only three answers that you can get to this question, and that is the unfunded, the payments towards the unfunded, going up? Are they staying the same, or are they going down as a percentage of the budget for the year? And the answer to that is those payments are going up, and if they're going up, they're crowding out spending. And if they're crowding out spending, we're lowering the amounts of service that we're providing to our people, and thus degrading those things to the folks that are out in our county. And that's the problem.
Exactly, yeah. And what you're essentially saying is that the county pays, and it's hard to get an exact number, but the county has about a $42 million discretionary budget. They're paying somewhere between $3 and $6 million in a fund to cover these employee costs. And a good portion, and we don't know yet, and I doubt any of the county commissioners, certainly they have not publicly asked for an analysis, but I don't know if anybody really knows the answer, but a good portion of that check that's written, let's call it $5 million at this point, is really just to cover this underfunding, which unfortunately isn't enough to cover the growth, because it appears to be going up every single year. And the result of that, and again, this could be happening wherever you live, folks, the result of that is that the county in this case is going to have to raise taxes. And what a shock that coming up next week, the county commission will be presenting a whole slew of tax renewals, but also a tax increase. And we'll see how that is addressed. But so prepare, folks, if you feel that you're not paying your fair share, if you're one of those 99%ers who feel that everybody ought to do the right thing and pay your fair share, this is an opportunity that you'll, I'm sure, embrace, because your taxes in Muskegon County are going to go up if in fact the county board votes on what is on the agenda for next week. Also, of course, we've talked about the jail ad nauseum, but unfortunately, as it may make you sick to your stomach to talk about it, it's going to make your wallet far sicker. And if you have a county that is well managed, you prepare and you plan like some of the leaders did in the past in our county, and you plan for these gigantic expenses that are coming down the pike. And of course, that's not happening. And if I can, just because we're running out of time here, but I want to bring up that people have asked about this. The lawsuit, which I was involved in, I actually filed suit against the county for violations of the Freedom of Information Act and the Open Meetings Act, and the official time to respond by the county has passed. So, in theory, we could file a default judgment, and who knows what would happen there. But we have not chosen to do that. We are still in negotiations with the county. But there's one very big sticking point, and it's pretty clear. At least this is our allegation, and I would say anybody who could look at this suit that we filed for their violations, it's pretty clear that they did violate Freedom of Information Act and FOIA and open meetings. But unfortunately, and this is a sticking point here, the county commissioners, and I'll read from a Muskegon Chronicle article, says, quote, in approving the reenactment, several county commissioners made it clear that they were not admitting any wrongdoing by conducting the closed session involving a legal opinion. So the county continues to publicly state, at least the county leaders, those who hope to be elected, many of them in August, are saying that they did not violate any laws. So we will find out if they're right and if the advice they're getting from their attorney has been correct.
And who knows what happens behind closed doors? Only the shadow knows.
Well, and again, that's exactly what we're trying to stop, which is these closed door meetings, in particular, the illegal closed door meetings. So
if you got nothing to hide, why don't you say something?
That's right.
Well, that's
exactly.
And again, we're going to see
political statements.
That's really what this is all about. If we're involved, we can call our commissioners and our governor and our representatives to task. And I think a really cool thing happened last week, I think, or it actually happened 2 weeks ago, but the result happened this past week, and that was Memorial Drive, the Causeway, which connects Muskegon to North Muskegon. At least one lane was opened, and there was some work that was being done farther up on US 31, which was combining to cause an enormous, terrible, and dangerous.
Which was a great Sunday when we went home. That was actually opened up. The bridge was actually opened
Yeah,
up.
on that Friday evening, I was caught in it for an hour and a half.
Yeah, me too.
And what happened was, though, and this folks, I'm going to just give kudos to all of you out there who made a stink. And the reality was that we contacted our elected officials, our state reps, our state senator. Some of you contacted the governor's office. Some of you contacted your county commissioners, and you made a stink. The Chronicle, to their credit, jumped on this thing too, and we got some response. We are not helpless. We have the ability to really create change in our community, and good for all of us here. One quick thing, the final day to sign up to be a precinct delegate or a candidate for public office for this coming election is on Tuesday, 4 o'clock at the county clerk's office. And this is a great opportunity. Folks, this county is a wonderful spot. We can change it. We can make it a better county. But if you're going to sit on your bunions and you're just going to, grab another elephant ear and complain, well, then you're going to get, sadly, what you will deserve. We need
hungry.
some heroes out there.
I'm hungry now.
Well, it's not everybody can run for office, but everybody can run for precinct delegate, and it costs you nothing. All you need to do, you must go to your city or your township clerk, but you can become part of the answer as opposed to part of the problem. And right now, the big answer that we want to fill is how the bill's going to get paid for the studio. So we will be back with the Heartland Institute folks right after this break.
Oh, don't you love me sometime? Well, you dadgum government, you sorry so-and-sos. You got your damn hands in every pocket of my clothes. Well, you dadgum.
And we are back at Eye on Muskegon. Jim Riley, Oscar Osbo, and Captain Fred Birch. And we are we're talking to a time zone handicapped gentleman from the Heartland Institute, Mr. Jim Lakely. Good morning, Jim.
Good morning, fellas.
And happy Mother's Day to you.
Same to you.
Jim is the communications director.
That's true.
Okay, of the Heartland Institute. And as we mentioned earlier in the show, that the Heartland Institute is a nonprofit research and education organization. And your prime interests are the free market solutions to the various social and economic problems that we all face at one point or another in our country. And we asked you in, Jim, because, and thank you for getting up this morning out there in Chicago, but we asked you because you folks have got an expertise in the energy conundrum that we all face, and Muskegon is one of many communities looking at expanding into the green energy with windmills and that type of thing. And to my way of thinking, as we've seen many of these windmill farms, sucking energy or sucking money and federal dollars primarily, sometimes state, and not really producing to the level that they were promised. You folks, I know, have done some deep insight and analysis of various windmill farms, if you will. What's your view? What's the view of the Heartland Institute?
Well, wind farms, they seem like a good idea, but in reality, they're expensive, they're unreliable. They're boondoggles, and they've been propped up by the federal taxpayer in this country for 20 years and have never been able to stand on their own. I believe Congress this year is trying to decide whether to, continue some $5 or $6 billion in subsidies for wind energy again this year. And in times of, in Europe they call it austerity, but in times of fiscal belt tightening around here, is that really worth it? I think no, because there was a debate about this just a few weeks ago, and Mike Pompeo of Kansas, where it's quite windy, and you think that they would like wind farms. He made the point that every time this bill comes up, the wind farm industry says, we just need a little bit more time, a little bit more time. They've been saying that for 20 years. It's time for them to figure out how to do it on their own instead of with the American taxpayer propping them up.
Well, what is the little more time that they want? What is it that they ultimately expect to evolve into that would stop the need for these billions and billions and billions of dollars of subsidies?
Actually, I'm not sure what exactly they expect this to evolve into. I think they just expect to always be subsidized. The reality is, wind power amounts to just about 1%, between 1 and 2% of the total amount of power in this country. And despite all the subsidies, despite all California alone has about 14,000 wind turbines. There is no way to make it sustainable. That's really the truth, and Europe is proof of that. Just smaller countries. If you think of England as just being like the size of Texas, so it's just one American state, or Denmark being the size of New Jersey. Them as countries have tried wind power and tried to make it work, tried to make it sustainable, tried to make it reliable for their energy plan, and they can't do it. So if they can't do it, there's no way the United States is going to do it. I just think the wind industry just has their hand out for as long as they can, because Congress and people in Congress are just, I think, a little gullible and think that eventually that something will work out, and then raises their green bona fides, but there's really no future for it.
Well, now we're seeing, of course, the Solandra, the company that made solar panels, and there was. Golly, it seems like almost weekly there's another, unfortunately not well-publicized debacle and demise of another highly subsidized company from U.S. tax dollars that collapses or gets into some serious trouble. But we know that the solar industry is in trouble for a lot of reasons. You said that there's going to be a discussion, I don't know, is that going to be happening in 2012 about continuing these solar subsidies, or is that going to be happening in 2013?
No, it should be happening this year. By the end of the year, they keep kicking it around, and I think a lot of the green subsidies overall for solar and for biomass and for wind has to be renewed every few years, and this just happens to be the year that it comes up again. So it's been in discussion here and there in Congress.
Hey, Jim, this is Fred. When you're talking about wind subsidies, what percentage of the cost for whatever unit you want to use of electricity is actually subsidized? Is it 30%, 40%, 60%?
That's a very good question. I don't know. I'm trying to think offhand. Just waking up, guys. But just thinking it over. The answer is quite a bit. You could look it up. I guess we can all use our Google machines and figure that out. But I do know that overall, total green subsidies from Congress for 2011 was $24 billion. I mean, ethanol was the biggest gain from that, about $6 billion. But wind wasn't far behind, with about $4 to $5 billion.
One of the things that we're seeing here, though, if we've got wind energy that is being subsidized to this very high level, what I'm seeing and reading is that nationally, wind projects seem to be gaining momentum. We've got a Mason County, which is not too far from here. A big wind farm is, I guess, in the process of being constructed. And, of course, in Muskegon County, our county commissioners just on Thursday agreed to bring to allow GAMSA, which is a company that puts these projects together, to give them a 3-year monopoly to review the plan. What happens if the obviously it's a political year and these are going to be political decisions. At some point, let's say you've got a wind farm that's built as opposed to ours, which is not built. But at some point, if these subsidies are reduced, what happens to the big wind farm that we've got that's already up and operating?
It probably rusts and goes unmaintained. I mean, the subsidies, and we're talking about tax breaks as well as direct grant payments to these companies to keep their windmill farms going, because there is a lot of maintenance involved in a wind farm. And again, they don't just get tax breaks for that maintenance, but they also get grants to help put them up and help maintain them as well. Direct federal money from the taxpayer to make this happen. And without that, wind power is just not sustainable. It would not continue. A lot of these projects, they have to include several billion for decommissioning, or I'm not sorry, not several billion, but like $1 million or $2 million, depending on the size of the project, to decommission these windmills and take them down. I don't know if that's the case with the GAMSA USA there in Muskegon, but it's quite common. And I think you would just see these things come down without the federal taxpayer propping it up, they can't sustain themselves.
So if, in fact, we sign, we've just done proposals right now where we've just guaranteed that GAMSA is allowed to study the wind, and they would be the party that would have the capability to put it out on the site that they're talking about. So there aren't any contracts put together. But if we move forward, and here in Muskegon, what you're suggesting is that our commissioners should insist on some amount of money be put into escrow in order to decommission these wind turbines if the project goes broke, if the company goes broke, et cetera?
Yeah, that would certainly be a good idea. I know that your local politicians there consider the using a wastewater land for a different purpose and for something like wind farms. I mean, it sounds great. It looks terrific in the newspaper. It looks great in a re-election flyer. It makes them look green and all that's fine. But there are consequences to this, and there are real world decisions to be made here. GAMSA USA, I was looking this up yesterday. GAMSA is a Spanish company, and they posted a $21 million euro loss in the first quarter of 2011. That should be a concern to people there in Muskegon. That is this company going to be around for the long term to take care of these windmills? If they're not going to, if they're already, and they called the first quarter of 2011 one of their best quarters ever, and they still had a $21 million euro loss, which I guess is about $35 million or so in American dollars.
All right,
and they just canceled a wind project off the coast of Virginia last week. There are some issues here.
All right, so but at least at the point where we are in Muskegon, where unless there's more to this story than we are aware, the only thing that's happened here in Muskegon is that we've given them an exclusive option to develop it for a relatively small amount of money, $50,000 a year.
Right.
Well, let me ask you this. Let's just say that GAMSA is able to start developing, because they were talking, interestingly enough, the gentleman was at the county commission meeting here. They were talking about having this thing up and running in 2014, 2015. So it's not like they're going to sit there for 3 years. But let's say that they get this thing half built. You get 20 towers up, and but they're not fully up and ready to go, and they belly up. What happens then?
That's a good question.
Has it happened in the United States? It certainly happened in Europe, but what happens in those places?
Well, I mean, like I said, there's usually money put in escrow to take them down in the event that something goes wrong or the company goes, has second thoughts and whatnot.
All right, in other words, before you build it, the contract states that money will be put away. Now, I will say that I don't have a tremendous amount of faith in that, and the reason for that is that we just had an airline, and I don't know the name of the airline, but it was flying out of Kalamazoo, primarily direct flights to Florida, and it out of the blue, what a surprise, it went bankrupt, and many of the folks who had tickets fully expected to get paid back, because one of the things that you are supposed to do by federal law, if you have an airline, is have money in escrow that's available to pay people back who have prepaid for airline tickets in the event that you run into a bankruptcy filing. Well, shockingly, turns out that this money was not in escrow. So we are relying on the government or the goodwill of the company that's in bankruptcy to do the right thing, and we've not seen the government do that. Historically, when government oversight is provided, it doesn't seem to be all that good. We know we've got, just as another example, we saw J.P. Morgan, the largest bank in the United States, just came out with a $2 billion trading loss, and this is after this enormous Dodd-Frank banking bill, which was supposed to provide more oversight of the banks. And the interesting, to me, response from the media almost universally was, well, there's proof we need more regulation. So I'm not so sure that these promises that monies will be set aside will in fact turn out to be there if and when these projects run into trouble. But have you seen any evidence of that?
I haven't seen any evidence of it myself that I can think of offhand. But I think it really is something to be concerned about. I'm glad we're talking about that. If a company if a company whose project is supported chiefly by, because it's unsustainable economically, but it's chiefly propped up by federal subsidies, and those subsidies go away. That's big trouble for the company. They have to think about what they're going to do to survive, and they're not going to be able, obviously, to keep all their projects going at once. I think it is very important for your local politicians to get those kinds of assurances as best they can from GameStop. Now, of course, if I wouldn't expect them to go bankrupt and just go out of business. I mean, they're a conglomerate. They're huge, but they should get some assurances that if they don't like this project anymore, or if they find it unsustainable, or if their federal subsidies are taken away, that they have to do something about it. They can't just leave those wind farms up there. Now, of course, the second alternative, and you see this, and it's quite common for any project, any kind of project, that if another company will come in and take over, they'll sell these off to another company that can make it sustainable, that can make it work. I wouldn't expect the wind farms to go up and just be sitting there without even spinning, based on some kind of financial foul up. But that is definitely something your local politicians need to keep in mind and try to get assured.
Can I ask this question of all of you? Actually, I want to ask everybody this question here. This is Oscar, by the way. All these farms and everything else, they have these things they have. Why is it not available for just individuals to do it at their own house? Just to do a wind farm at their own house, or set up their own house with a windmill, and wouldn't that take away from all that extra stuff that you would have to do a farm? And I mean, if each individual wanted to supply their own power, there's ways to do it, and it would be a lot cheaper for the individual to do it than to do these farms, I would think. But is that something that would never happen? I mean, I know we looked into it, and there was a lot of regulations that kicked us in the butt, so to speak, because we couldn't do these things because of the grid and because of all the the way that they said that these wouldn't work, and all the different permits you would have to get, and the money you would have to get for the tower if the tower fell. And is it just too much work for you to do it at your own location?
Well, it's not very economically viable for an individual to do that, although it does happen from time to time. I used to live in Southern California, in what they call the Inland Empire, where it's sunny all the time. Yeah, you see some windmills there, but individually, homes would have solar panels on their house, and then they would start to sell that energy back to the grid.
Right.
They would make money on it. That's a little different because the sun is out 360 days a year, and so it's pretty reliable. The wind has to blow a certain speed to make it work, and it's very intermittent. I mean, that's one of the big problems with wind in general, is that it's not reliable enough. In fact, you need the coal-fired power plants, the nuclear power plants, the natural gas power plants as backup for these wind farms.
Well, so even if you had a successful wind farm, I know I was in mid-Wisconsin last summer, and they've got an enormous wind farm out there. It's really kind of cool to look at, and if you like gigantic structures on the prairie, if you will,
and bird bodies flying everywhere,
and little dead Donald ducks everywhere. But in the event that you've got a giant operating one of those, isn't the ultimate problem though that since they require federal subsidies, that the electric prices, as the President of the United States, Barack Obama, has so famously said, that won't electric prices necessarily have to skyrocket, because the problem that we're facing here in Michigan, and I think it's probably the case in other states, was that our politicians many years ago said that we had to get, in our case, I believe it's 10% of electric must be generated from what they call renewable sources, and that is kicking in, I believe, within the next couple of years.
But again, that's a political issue, not a practical issue.
Well, I know that it's absolutely a political issue as opposed to a practical issue, and I know that there are groups lobbying. I believe this was tabled last year, but I know that there are groups lobbying now to increase that 10% requirement to 15%. What are you seeing on that nationally? Because you can imagine what that's going to do to our electricity costs.
Oh, of course. I mean, that's, as you mentioned, that's one of the most famous quotes by Obama, and I wish people would realize this when they see their energy bills. Look, looking at the latest statistics from the Department of Energy, wind power costs about 8 cents per kilowatt hour, for the consumer, and coal is only 4 cents.
Now, is that wind, just a question here, is that wind with its subsidy, or is that the pure cost?
That's with the subsidy.
So with the billions of subsidies, it's still double of what coal is. That
is right. It's still double what coal is. And the important thing here is that, as you mentioned, it's usually state by state. This is not a national issue, but it's state by state issue where states impose renewable energy mandates, where they say that, okay, whatever your local power company is, you must get 10%, 15%, 20% of your energy that you sell to your customers from renewable energy. Well, okay, if we have to, we'll do that. So they get it from biomass, they get it from wind, they get it from solar, and they sell it to you at a huge cost because they have to pass those costs along to you. I mean, the laws of economics do not end because of federal mandate, because Congress has said something or your state government has said something. The law of economics are real, and those laws are affected. You're affected by those laws just like everybody else in the energy department.
So let's just take a situation here. Let's say that we build these wind farms here in Muskegon County, and of course in another adjacent county, Mason County or a nearby county, is in the midst of getting their wind farm up and running. Now, we don't have a shortage of energy here in the state of Michigan because our governor and legislator kicked out so many businesses that in fact the demand for energy is not high. But so we have plenty of energy. So if we get these renewable sources of energy in there, our electric prices, and more importantly, the electric prices for the companies that would consider moving into our state or expanding within our state, their costs are going to go up?
Absolutely, they're going to go up.
And that's with the current massive billions upon billions of annual subsidies. Is that correct?
That's right. In fact, it's kind of like at least a two-headed monster. I mean, one of the things that keeps unsustainable green energy projects going are the mandates from states that say you have to get X percent of your energy from renewable energy sources. That's why, I mean, it's a self-created boondoggle of a market that works from both ends. They mandate demand so that they have to put up these silly windmills. You know, learning more about Muskegon as I'm listening to you, that there isn't a huge power demand in that area of Michigan, or maybe the state in general, because of the loss of jobs and the outflux of people. It just makes this whole thing about having wind farms in Muskegon even more silly. I mean, you need to have the wind blow for the wind farm to actually work, to produce energy for you. That is unreliable and is hard to store. It's in fact impossible to store. So that's one of the big problems with it. We have to have energy when we want it. I woke up this morning at 8 o'clock, picked up the phone, it worked. I can't wait to see if the wind is blowing to get my phone to work. I mean, that's just not the way this economy and our society operates. You have to have it on all the time. But the idea that you have to have these wind farms up because of mandates to get a certain percentage of your energy from renewable sources is crazy. I mean, you need to have for the kind of wind turbines that are proposed to put up there in Muskegon. You need a sustained wind of 14 miles an hour. I mean, do you know how windy it is in Muskegon? Is it really, really windy there all the time? 14 miles an hour.
Lately it has been, but
well,
Right,
actually, no. GameSA has come out, and one of the reasons, at least their explanation for how long this contract has taken to finally come to fruition was that Muskegon's wind is on the bottom end of the scale for it to be economically viable under current technology.
Yeah, I know. I saw that myself. So, if you need at least 14 miles an hour, and Muskegon is at the low end of the scale, if they were investing their own money, there's no way they would put wind farm there. You just wouldn't. I mean, you have to. It's already kind of a sketchy proposition. You want to put it in a place where it blows a gale all the time, like lock up the coast of Scotland or something. You don't want to do it in Muskegon. Again, if they were investing their own money, we wouldn't even be having this conversation today. But they're investing our money, so they're going to keep going forward with it.
What is the future here then? I mean, are we doomed? Or are these things going to keep going on and on and on until we turn into Greece and everything collapse?
I hope not. Look, the Heartland Institute's position on energy policy and subsidies is that we don't want subsidies for anybody. We don't want special subsidies and handouts for oil or for nuclear or for coal or for gas or for wind or for solar, for anybody. If your technology can survive on its own, God bless you, and let's use it. But if it can't, again, 20 years of propping up the wind industry. How long is enough? I mean, we're talking billions and billions of dollars that we do not have.
But the alternative,
for a project that will not work.
The alternative fuels used by big business and the rich people. I guess I would include Al Gore in this, but the alternative is the polluting carbon dioxide and greenhouse gases that are destroying the Earth and will soon, at some point, destroy all life on Earth, including little babies and little deer, right?
Oh, you're serious about that, really?
No, I'm not. But but that's the argument, and in fact, you have to address that argument. Really, it must be addressed unless you're going to continue pouring money into alternative energy and are comfortable with getting rid of, which is the vowed goal of the Democrat Party anyway, of getting rid of all fossil fuels. I would call them natural resources for energy.
Yeah, I mean, it is a matter of dispute whether carbon dioxide produced by man is dangerously heating the planet. The Heartland Institute is going to have a climate conference from May 21st to the 23rd here in Chicago to discuss just those very things and the latest science and research and technology, or technology I should say, but data studies that have been done looking at these links or the lack of these links. Like I said, in Chicago, and this is a very complicated issue. Really, one thing you should remember is that the Al Gores of the world and his friends James Hansen and other alarmist scientists out there, they produced computer models that said it is going to be X. It's going to be this hot on this date. And they've been doing this for a couple decades now. And their models are not true. What's really happening to the Earth is not matching up with their models. None of their models have ever worked. You know, the old adage, garbage in, garbage out.
Jim, we're coming up against a break.
Okay.
Could you hang on over the break?
I would love to.
Appreciate it. We'll be right back, folks. Eye on Muskegon awaits.
Well, you dadgum government, you sorry so-and-sos. You got your damn hands in every pocket of my clothes. Well, you
And we're back at Eye on
dadgum
Muskegon. We got the same crew. We got Fred, we got Oscar, we got Jim Riley, your host. And we've got Jim Lakely from the Heartland Institute, a conservative think tank. I guess I could probably call you that. Jim, got a question here. We're not going to keep you too much longer, and we do appreciate you being here. But you folks have got the International Climate Change Symposium, or what do you call that, coming up this next week?
The 7th International Conference on Climate Change. That is correct.
Okay. And you're going to be following this NATO summit. What's going on in Chicago? I see that the trains, the L and all the various trains now, they're soon to be imposing airport-style security. What's the mood of Chicago?
The mood in Chicago is, what the heck do we get ourselves into? A lot of people are not going to be coming into work late next week and early, late coming this Friday and then through Monday. My understanding is there's a no-fly zone of 10 square miles above the city of Chicago. If anybody, and there's an actual shoot-down order. The military is told that they have the ability to quickly shoot somebody down if they're flying in airspace they should not be in Chicago. Trains, I saw this the other day. I take the Metro train in every day. Starting, I think, Thursday, you can't have a bag any bigger than a computer bag or a purse that you have on the train. You can only have one of those bags. You cannot take any luggage with you. In fact, even coffee is on the banned list. I saw the banned list. No weapons and no coffee. Those are the two things I can't abide. I need both of those things to go into Chicago,
or at least to get out alive once you've been there. Your conference, which it's open to anybody, is it not?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's open to the public. You can still register to attend, and of course, we're also streaming everything live. On the internet. From the conference, all the stuff. So yeah, it's climate.
How do we get that? How do we get that live streaming?
The easiest thing is just to go to heartland.org, and you'll see a link to the conference right there. And then there'll be, come Monday, there'll be one of the links at the top that says videos. Will say watch live instead, and then there you go.
Well, let me ask you something. I don't, for the life of me, quite understand why a NATO conference would bring in all of these agitators and anarchists. But your conference, which is essentially looking at the climate debate from the conservative standpoint, from the denier standpoint, from the witches of Massachusetts skeptic standpoint, who your house ought to, as some of the leaders of the environmental movement have suggested that environmentalists ought to go to skeptics' houses and burn them down. And of course,
at least it would be warm.
Well, for a short period of time.
That's true. Short period of time. That's right.
That would reduce your carbon footprint at least shortly thereafter.
Permanently.
But your event is going to come on Monday, and all of these anarchists and others are going to be in town. And one thing I've learned from the folks on the left is that they are brilliant when it comes to social media and getting the word out kind of in the underground. Doesn't it seem to make sense that they would just stick around an additional day and visit your site also, your conference?
Well, we're having our conference at the Hilton Chicago, right there on Michigan Avenue, and across the street is one of the quote unquote free speech zones for the Occupy crowd, and that. So they're going to be right there, and we're going to be right there, and we're not afraid to be there with them and to deal with whatever may happen. There's going to be increased security. I mean, the whole city is going to be basically a police state for several days. The hotel itself is going to have many dignitaries in it, so there's their own government security teams are there. The hotel itself has really increased its security presence. We have paid for private security, which we always pay for these events, but we doubled it up this year. It's inevitable. We're not going to be scared off. We're not going to be scared off our mission. of advancing free markets and common sense and real science on climate issues, because NATO is in town and some weirdos are across the street. Look, one of the reasons we scheduled it at this time was precisely because of the NATO summit. The speaker at our first dinner, keynote dinner on Monday night is Václav Klaus, the president of the Czech Republic, who's probably the most sensible person and a very brave skeptic of man-made global warming in Europe. He started to convince some of his friends over there in Europe that this whole green energy boondoggle is not the way to go, that we need to sustain our economies first and not chase rabbits phantom rabbits down holes that run us into ruin. So, it was scheduled in part to dovetail with the NATO conference, and we were very pleased that Václav Klaus had agreed to speak at our conference. It's going to be fantastic.
Well, it certainly takes courage to be a politician, and it takes courage to be someone like yourself and your organization to stand up against the conventional wisdom as espoused by sadly too much of the major media in this country. I wish you well there. I certainly would like to have you and other folks from your organization back as time goes on, and in particular, I will be looking forward to seeing the conference. I was thinking about going down, and then I realized just the logistics might be rough. But I will be looking at it online, and we will follow up with you folks down the road. So thank you so much. Appreciate your efforts, and the best of luck next week.
Thanks very much, Jim.
Thank you. Well, here we are. Are we going to be going to break?
Sure.
Okay, we'll take a break here, and we'll be back to chat among ourselves about this and others.
Well, you dadgum government, you sorry so-and-sos. Well, you dadgum government, you sorry so-and-sos. You got your damn hands in every pocket of my clothes. Well,
and we're back at Eye on Muskegon. And we can now take phone calls, folks. So if you're inclined to give us a buzz, give us a call at 231-830-3109. And we'd love to get you on Muskegon's #1 rated talk radio show, any kind of radio show in our time slot. So we are ready to rock and or roll, or even both if you are of the mind to do that.
I didn't know you were that hip.
Yes,
Sorry.
well, rock and or roll. I don't want to do both
Is
at
that
the same
politically
time.
correct way to say it? Rock and or roll?
No, it's physically
Physically
logical for someone of my age. Hey, a couple of announcements I wanted to get through, and I noticed these folks are doing a really good job. The LST for Veterans Day.
Love those guys.
Well, they've done a great job in promoting this thing. And I saw it on television actually this morning too. But on this coming weekend on May 19th, there will be Armed Forces Day, special events, exhibits, that kind of thing. And then we've got this. They're actually they've got their job fair coming up. Which is that this weekend? I believe it's perhaps maybe the week after, and that's coming up also. The Milwaukee Clipper will have its annual benefit on Sunday, May 20th. This is going to be from, let's see, 11 to 1 with ship tours from 3 to 5. Definitely, we want to support the Milwaukee Clipper. We don't want to get lazy on any one of these organizations, be it the Silversides and the museum there, the LST and the Milwaukee Clipper. As Chicago found out, if you just sit on your bunions and you do nothing but eat your elephant ears, someone may come and snatch that prize away.
Elephant ears again.
Yeah.
Well,
goodness.
the first lady got me all geeked about everybody eating and doing the things that she approves of, and
What's
I'm
the
sure
move?
that she would not approve of the elephant ears. Hey, one other event coming up this week: the Girls on the Run, 4K, Saturday, May 19th. This is volunteers. They're looking for volunteers for Girls on the Run. This is at Heritage Landing, and you run through downtown Muskegon. Make sure to arrive early, and they have something called "Get Your Happy Hair for the Run." I suppose I won't be there for that.
Well, you can use. Well, no, forget it.
But this is via yeah, maybe Oscar could do it. But this is through Every Woman's Place, and you can give them a call at 759-7909, or just Google Girls on the Run. So these are some of the events coming up. Hey, one thing that just caught my attention today was a big...
Look like a squirrel.
Yeah,
That's the kind of attention you have.
Well, pretty much. Well, no, actually, this is all perfectly scripted, so please don't let people know how we do things here. But really, three big birthdays that have a little bit to do with the Michigan area. Joe Louis, the boxer, the very famous boxer. Interestingly, his nickname was the Brown Bomber. I'm not sure that would be allowed today, but he lived and died
Great
with
boxer.
that wonderful name on Joe Louis. Stevie Wonder. Now, he went to the Lansing School for the Blind, and his real name, interestingly, was Steveland Morris. So
Is that right?
So he was probably desperately looking for a way to shrink Steveland,
Into
probably
Stevie Wonder.
Probably wanted to get rid of Morris also. So he's now Stevie Wonder, and he was born on this day in 1950. And
He did well at Motown Land, but anyway.
oh gosh, I mean, he's one of the few really who continues.
He is
to
an
this
Yeah,
day.
amazing
well, they're
as a
going
major.
to doing the
Amazing.
big tribute to him again too. So.
Yeah, well, I mean, the guy won't die. I mean, he's our age. He's our age.
won't die.
And the Worm, Dennis Rodman, big Michigan-based at one point in his life.
Yeah, no
basketball
comment.
player.
No
well,
comment on that
maybe
one.
doesn't stand with the rest of them,
I'll
but
stick with Stevie
nonetheless.
and Joe. But yeah,
Hey,
can I shamelessly promote something real quick?
absolutely, please do.
Of course, because you're on, of course, every Monday at 8:00 on Muskegon.
Monday,
Television.
Wednesday, Friday on Talking Muskegon.
But man, you're on every Monday at 8:00 on Muskegon Television. Though.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
Yes, thanks to Oscar Osbo.
But I would like to mention also that I'm going to be filming or taping the parade for Fruitport Township, their Old Fashions Day parade for Memorial Day. We're featuring that. And also the one thing I was telling you about a couple of weeks ago that I filmed or taped was it's called In Honor. It was the White Lake Corral. I don't know if you had seen that or not, but that was quite an event. It was all in memory of all the our armed services. So.
And where would folks be able to see those?
They'll be seeing that on Muskegon Television on Tuesday at 8.
Tuesday at 8. Okay, so you're not going to stomp all over our show on Monday.
Well, I was thinking about it.
Yeah.
But yeah, Tuesday at 8 for that one, and then also we're going to have the parade. It's going to be on 3 times in the Memorial Day.
Oh, that's great.
weekend
And this will be
holiday.
on Tuesdays. The parade also on Tuesdays down the road?
Right.
Okay.
So
All right, and that's Muskegon. Now, that would be TV 38 if you got rabbit ears, which unfortunately, increasingly more and more folks are dropping their cable and satellite and going to the rabbit ears. And
I'm one of them.
If you've got Comcast, it is channel 397. Our show is Monday at 8, and then
I can
your
actually
two
get
shows.
38 in Whitehall, which is kind of amazing, I think, because I'm with my little antenna on top of my roof. So
Well, that's a great little channel. Actually, I was scanning some weeks ago, and I saw Route 66 was on channel TV 38, channel 397.
People
on
love that
Comcast.
show.
And honestly, what a cool show!
Yeah, that is a great show.
It's been a long time. Hey, one thing I did want to get to, Fred, you had done a little research, and you came up with a gem that I had not heard anything about this this oil shale.
Oh yeah,
we're talking about energy.
I was going to actually ask Jim about it, but the GAO came out with a report on Friday. I think it was actually in congressional testimony, where they were talking about the shale oil in the basin, and unfortunately I can't remember which basin it is, but it's the basin that runs from underneath Utah and down through down from Wyoming down through Utah, and they estimated that there is a tremendous amount of oil that's available, and that if we could extract 30% of the oil that is available in that basin, that it is equal to the entire world's known reserves, proven reserves. And that is just astonishing. If you think about that,
It's astonishing.
In one basin, not the one that runs up in North Dakota and South Dakota or up into Canada, but in that one basin that runs from Wyoming down through Utah, it is equal to the known world's reserves of oil. And they estimated that if we could extract 30%. And with today's technology, you can extract 30 to 50%. And so that is on the low end of an estimation for that particular basin. Now, that's the good news. The bad news is that 3/4 of the land that this runs under is owned by the federal government. And I say that's bad news because, of course, it's locked up by the federal government.
As we've seen with Anwar up in Alaska.
So now we have, and it's on the record, it's on the congressional record, and it's a GAO report, Government Accounting Office report. So this is official. This is nonpartisan. There's your estimation. So now, whenever any of the pundits out there or the politicians would say, well, we only have 20% of the world's oil or whatever, you say, no, actually, we got half. And give them that report and show it to them and say, so if you lock it up, of course, you only got 20% because you're not allowing us to access the oil.
Well, that is astonishing, and it's, it to me kind of shocks me because as I do show prep over the weekend, I'm looking for interesting points. That's most certainly an interesting article, and yet I didn't see that anywhere. You would think that that our media would be shouting from the rooftops this wonderful news that in fact we're not running out of energy. Certainly not within our lifetime, or our children's lifetime, or our grandchildren's lifetime, and we don't need to bankrupt our country like Europe has bankrupted their countries for their grandchildren by doing things that don't make sense.
If you think about what you could do with the proceeds from that oil reserve. If we could become a net exporter, we could actually probably close the deficit down to nothing.
We wouldn't be dependent on Saudi Arabia and Venezuela and or Iraq.
Well, yeah, we would not have to defend far reaches of the globe, perhaps. It depends on how you look at this thing.
Or selling volts.
Yeah,
or subsidizing and selling volts, to rich people or Fiskars.
Or Fiskars, which just burned down another house Fisker. The other day. Did you see that?
Yes. And again, the battery, the technology isn't there. I think this is, the most important point that maybe I can bring to this conversation is that there is little question, just by definition, at some point we will run out of natural resources that will provide us with the power. So we must come up with, as human beings, alternative energy. There's little question that's going to happen. Now, whether it's going to happen in 10 years, as some of the enviro loonies have promised, or it'll happen in 1,000 years, or whatever, what happens. But the most important point to remember is that natural resources, be it oil, coal, shale, natural gas, whatever, the natural resources that we have, methane, and we're doing, actually they are capturing methane out there at the county wastewater area. But these are all the bridges that will allow human beings to move to the next technology, whatever it may be. It may be a super duper clean use of natural resources, but it may be fission or fusion or something that we've never heard of.
I think what you're saying is you should not precipitate the crisis. In other words, you should not overestimate and precipitate and cause the crisis before the crisis actually occurs. We aren't in a crisis.
Well, exactly. Yeah, very well said. And in particular, if by precipitating this crisis, you're going to fill this country up with windmills that don't work and solar plants that are going bankrupt and biomass farms and the like that will ultimately leave our children with the bill and with no jobs to pay that bill, because as we all know, that companies, people who hire people, they need energy in order to do whatever it is that they do. And we don't have Apple Computer, which is at today's valuation the most valuable corporation in the world. Apple makes nothing in the United States. Now, I'm not suggesting that smart companies around the world should all move away from the United States, but if the federal government and the state governments, and in the case of Muskegon here, the county governments, are going to engage in behaviors that are going to lead corporations to think, oops, this isn't a place I want to expand in or move to, then we are going to end up like so many of these other countries where the jobs have left. We certainly see it in California, Illinois, New York to a certain extent, and we certainly saw it here in Michigan in the previous 8 years. So,
have you ever seen the show Shark Tank?
I know of it. I've seen a little bit of it.
The investors there are always talking about, Mark Burnett's one of them, that they all should go overseas to make the product. I mean, these are the millionaires of of this show that are telling people they should go overseas to make the product because it's going to be cheaper. Why should we make it in America?
Well, and if you think about it, if you're talking about
And this is on national TV, is what I'm saying.
Energy
you know.
versus labor costs. Now we're always talking about we want to have good paying jobs and all those other things. Well, if you have to cut costs somewhere, why don't you cut your costs on the energy side and on the overhead side so that you can provide good paying jobs for reliable people? So this is a direct correlation to those folks that say they want a lot of jobs. The way to do that is to have cheap and reliable energy.
Wow, well said. You know, I've not heard a politician even say it the way you did, and I'm really impressed because if you think about it, if you're going to, on one hand, say I want you to hire more people, and on the other hand, you're going to increase the cost of the company to do business, they're going to have to cut someplace. And we've seen this with McDonald's, where they're trying to do, and other companies trying to work as much as they can without the big problem, which of course is because of government intervention. The big problem all too often is human beings, employees.
Exactly.
Because you can operate with fewer employees, but you can't operate with no energy, or certainly less energy in many cases. Hey, we're coming up to the end of the show. A couple things I did want to just quickly touch on. We do have coming up on Tuesday at 4 o'clock in most of the county clerk's offices the last day to sign up for to run in the August primary and the November general election. So you don't have any time to left, really, except 2 more days to make that decision to run for public office. If you're not going to run yourself, which certainly I can understand not everyone's going to go off and do that, but consider strongly, take a look at who is running and strongly giving them a call and offering to support their campaign, and you can do that in any number of different ways. Now, next week we will be talking about who's going to be running in some of the more interesting races. I think that in my time living here in Muskegon County, we're going to have more contested races than I ever recall seeing. This is going to be a very interesting primary, which the primary election will be in August, and then, of course, the general election in November. So we'll talk about that. The biggest thing in particular, though, is you can run as a precinct delegate. And if you've got interest in that and questions on that, you can talk to your county clerk. Go ahead and do it. Don't forget to check us out on newstalk1090.com. Don't forget to check and look us up on eyeonmuskegon.com. All the information is there. Thanks again to Oscar, Andy, Jim, Heartland Institute, and all you wonderful listeners out there.
Well, Fred.
Yeah, what about me?
Oh, you know what? I got Andy. I thanked Andy from last week.
Well,
I'm thanking Fred
to
this
Andy
week.
too, but Fred in particular.
Fred, when I'm done, I'll give you a hug.
Cap.
Thanks to Captain Fred, and now you got me all screwed up here. So, I mean, yeah, you said it was perfectly scripted. If it's not written here, it isn't happening. So, hey, stay tuned for Tom Sanaki's Polka Melodies, and next week we will put the eye on you, Muskegon.
Sometimes